collapse with the cycle of money, of the Fed issuing money. That is why it's called funny money. It's called funny money because the dollar is no longer the international currency. Therefore, because of all other currencies being changed to dollars so they can buy goods and services throughout the international community, what we have now is people are creating alliances to buy with their own monies or with gold, or they're creating money like the Arab Emirates and the Middle East. The Arabs are starting to create their own currency.
India just announced they're going to stop using the dollar. That's a big deal.
Yes, they're buying their oil from Iran, and it's done with gold. Now, what's going to happen in America, because of this funny money, and it's a vicious cycle there inside Wall Street, where the Fed is buying up worthless T-bills and then issuing money because they bought up all these savings and and then they're funding the banks with more money. It's just a vicious cycle that's suicidal. And that's why inflation's going to raise 30% this year alone versus the 24% under Obama in 3 years. So you see, the country's going to become a calamity of chaos. You're going to have trucks hijacked on the highway, food trucks hijacked on the highways. It's going to be a dangerous time in America, and it's going to begin at the end of this year.
Well, as you know, in Argentina 10 years ago or 11 years ago, the same thing happened. They were very wealthy, but they had the same inflation happen. And you're always extremely well read. You're always up to the minute. The Davos meeting, as you know, the big global banksters are meeting in Europe, and they're actually saying, George Soros and others, that total collapse, worst time in history, worse than when George Soros was even involved as a trader in World War II. He's actually saying that. All these other big bankers are saying that, and they've covered up the inflation so far, but you're right, it's now accelerating, and their answer is Homeland Security drills. Practicing to lock up the general public, practicing, they're in the news again saying arrest people that criticize the government. They were detaining Rand Paul and groping Ron Paul at the airport, and Rush Limbaugh said, well, they don't want war, so they're terrorists. I mean, he actually said this. So they're sending up trial balloons now to actually use the National Defense Authorization Act on the American people. And as you said, for decades, and I've studied the history, it's true what you're saying, Hitler, the British, all of it, used their concentration camp models and their city lockdown models that they've used in Fallujah and Iraq and other areas, was all beta tested here. And now, isn't it fitting in a sick way that everything that was pioneered here in the United States is now going to come back on everybody?
On everybody. And that's why I mentioned that famous saying about deceit. A country founded on deceit will die by deceit. And this country, you know, it's a very disparate country. You have the South, you have New England, you have the Mid-Atlantic states, you have the Great Lakes, you have Texas, you have the Southwest, the West Coast, the Northern Plains, the Southern Plains, et cetera, et cetera. We have a very disparate country that's far from really being unified as a nation state because of our lack of culture. Now, when we have a lack of culture, there goes the value system. And the value system in America is one of convenience. Everyone in America will do anything for convenience. Like your Apples, you know, you own about 5 different kinds of computers that you can carry around on your person. That's ridiculous. I've seen them in the airplanes, you know, they have an iPhone, they have a book, they have a Kindle book. And then their computer. It's crazy. This country of convenience. They will allow this country to do anything against the Constitution, and then they opt for convenience. Well, we do have, and I really, really, really am afraid for Ron Paul, because he's the only one talking about the Constitution and the best parts of it, by the way. And if the miracle happens and the American people wake up and they nominate him, they're going to get rid of him just like they did the Kennedys and everyone else that allegedly a single assassin takes care of, going all the way back to Abraham Lincoln.
Russell, let me ask you a question from your historical research and just your gut sense for things that's proven accurate. You're somebody that stood up to tyranny. You've actually done more than just occupy a square. You physically occupied your own land and faced the federal attacks. Knowing this system, what's going to happen when a culture that sold their soul for convenience, for bread and circus football, who thinks it can't happen here, what's going to happen when the bottom completely drops out and the big banksters are offshore laughing about it? What is going to happen to the average person who is very soft and who doesn't have a culture? They have this plastic corporate culture that blows with the wind. I mean, if we had 7 million people, major university studies have shown, that starved to death or died from complications from malnourishment in the 10 years of the Great Depression, and 90% of people then were self-sufficient, only 10% were totally urban and unself-sufficient. Now we have the flip, 90% are urban and unself-sufficient. Of the 10% that are in the country, only 5% are self-sufficient. I mean, this sounds like a beyond Road Warrior scenario if things really do collapse like it looks like they are, and we see government and corporations racing around, digging in, and preparing for war with the people. What are they planning?
It's estimated that the big cities of America have about 3 to 4 days of food for the populace. 3 to 4 days. Now, with America approaching chaos, absolute chaos, and it can't feed itself because it can't afford the imports any longer. It can't afford to buy anything. What is going to be done is this is the most well-armed country in the world. Those guns are going to be used on each other and against law enforcement. It's going to be, that's what chaos is. Exactly. It's going to be a country that's in rebellion, and they don't even know why they're in rebellion. That's the sad part of what's coming, as I see it. It's rebellion because they've lost their convenience. Is it rebellion because they've lost their self-sufficiency? It's all of the above. But without a value system, it's going to be chaos.
Wow, very well said. In fact, you've really crystallized it for myself. People are just going to attack in all directions while the engineers of this sit offshore and kind of let us burn each other out. That's what they've done in Latin America. I've read the IMF World Bank documents where they say, we'll let them riot for a year. They'll beg for us to come in with the military later. So how do we use the chickens coming home to actually wake people up to go after the real threat, these corporate kleptocrats, instead of all of us just killing each other? I mean, how do we do that, Russell?
I've watched America go from where young people, like when I was in grade school, wanting to grow up to be a policeman, to where now every citizen is deathly afraid of the police. The police themselves have transformed and into this agent of destruction, and they enjoy the persecution of individuals, like you see what happened in Syria. It's happening here. So I do believe, just like in Syria, this is what we're going to see in America, except America's well armed.
Yes, I mean, we saw millions of guns sold in the month of December. I mean, if even just a few percentage points of the 180 million people now that own guns use them, I mean, it's going to be watching us eat each other alive, basically.
I'm really afraid for America. I'm not afraid for myself. You know, these concentration camps they call Indian reservations. By the way, that's another show, because this is legally Indian reservation, federally recognized Indian reservations in America are still on the books as prisoner of war camps. And that technically, on the books of America, we're still in a state of war with the United States government. And how that came about was a lawyer friend at Guantanamo defending or trying to defend one of those so-called terrorists. It might be a terrorist, I don't know. But the point being, in his research found out that Guantanamo was taken from Indian policy. So I and my friend, my younger brother, he's a lawyer, we went and researched even further into Pentagon files, etc., and found out that technically we're prisoner of war camps on these Indian reservations. That explains why we do not have constitutional rights. So what is going to happen is all these areas, and you know they got the FEMA camps and everything else, they're prepared to get the survivors off to the prisoner of war camp. And then the docile few that are left will get in line for their jobs in a society that no longer is built on convenience.
Well, you said it, and that is the system. As much as I don't want to believe that, the system, the controllers are building their entire architecture, their entire stance is built around a total collapse, and they're the ones pulling the trigger to do it while telling the poor sheep that they're there wanting to keep them safe and take care of them. It is monstrous what they're attempting to do. I want to shift gears now into your health. I mean, I've been watching the videos that you've been doing, your updates. We've been posting them on my YouTube channel and at INFOWARS.com. And I'm excited to see you getting better and better and better and better. And I mean, I saw an update you did a few weeks ago, and you look even better and sound better than then. Russell, I mean, are you 100% cured? And how did you do it when they told you, basically you didn't have any hope at the regular doctors?
Well, my wife had a tremendous amount to do with it. She's the miracle worker. She saved my life. But we used alternative medicines that are only available